January 2016. Recycle Rush was finally over, the year of totes and cans drawn to a close. And First Now had the difficult task of turning the tide from a widely disliked game and resuming the renaissance that had been 2012 to 2014. This game would birth the start of the modern FRC era, with ranking points, tasks for third robots that were more than just a drive base, and above all, a theme. Storming into the 2016 season, let's rewind to the year that teams firmly grasped onto Stronghold.
This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in FIRST scholarship. Scholarship applications will open in September. Get ready to go pro and get more information at kettering.edu/first. Fun is continuing to grow and looking for new ad partners for the 2024 season. If your organization has a positive message to spread to our over 250,000 unique viewers, go to firstupdatesnow.com/contact to get more information.
Stronghold was a shooting game, where robots aimed at one of 3 6'10" high slots in the tower, or 2 low slots. 10 boulders in the tower was a capture for a ranking point. In addition to this, teams ran across defenses in the middle of the field. Defenses were rotated out every match per alliance and audience selection. Crossing 4 of the 5 defenses twice led to a breach, which earned the alliance another rank point. At the end of the match, teams could park in front of the castle or climb onto the bar for additional points. Matches were high octane, strategy was complex, and drivetrains were even more complex. Hi, I'm your host, Ari. I'm an FRC mentor and alumni, and in 2016, I was a student and helped construct and drive our robot at 2 regionals in New York and the championship.
Hi, my name is Riley. My experience in 2016 was as a student. I traveled and was part of the scouting team. At the current moment, I'm an alumni volunteer and a mentor in Texas.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm a sponsor of an FRC team and an FRC parent. 2016 was my first full season involved in FIRST. We came in during build season of 2015. Our team did well enough to qualify for championship, and MSC, my first MSC experience was interesting.
Cool, so let's dive into it. Let's start with robot design, 2016. How did your teams and teams that you were around approach the robot design meta this season?
So my team at least kind of looked at it, and we decided that the general robot strategy that we thought we were going to see was going to be very short, very small robots, which looking at the defenses was going to be super easy to flip. It was going to be really hard to get over these defenses. And so we decided that we were going to focus tall, and with a tall robot, you might as well shoot high. A lot of the decisions were based on short versus tall robot, and you know, the decisions went from there. If you had a short robot, a lot of them started with shooting low before realizing that was actually a little bit more difficult with a short robot than shooting high. And then climbing versus not climbing also got really confusing with a short robot. And then, of course, there was so many drivetrain decisions, so much prototyping that went on with the drivetrain just to see what could get over those defenses. I remember we basically, I think within the first week or two, had made a wooden version of all of the defenses to test in our shop. Steve, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we had kind of the same experience. Again, this was my first year, even in the build process, really. So, and as not someone who was working on the robot, I was always kind of just sitting around and watching. But my recollection was they had some of the same challenges and you know, discussions about what they were going to do. They ended up going with kind of a low robot. It had like a 4-bar type of arm though that would reach up and grab the bar to pull themselves up to climb. And my stepson was driving, and it was his first year as the driver. They did pretty well in their competitions too. So I just distinctly remember him always seeming to go through, I don't remember what it was called now, but the gate that you opened, turn around, come back, and then
Sallyport, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Sallyport. That was like his thing. He was nailing that every time. And so they did go under the low bar, if I remember right, too. The limbo, wherever they called it. And yeah, it was an interesting year, especially being brand new. 2015 being my very first experience, which, but the game was really cool. I loved the theme. All of this stuff was really interesting to us. So yeah, their robot it looked a little bit like 16s from their release video, but yeah. Anyway, pneumatic tires. Kind of a low scoring robot. They would shoot up at the high goal. They didn't have a fast shooter. They had to be in like the exact right spot, it seemed like. But when they were there, and they were very accurate. So yeah.
Yeah, I think most teams' decisions this year was really focused on their drivetrains. Like, what drivetrain were you going to use? There was actually a COTS part that year called Rhino treads, and those were treads that were specifically designed. They were an Andy Mark product, and you could use them to get over defenses. A lot of teams opted for pneumatic air-filled tires instead. But one of my favorite examples of a robot build this year was actually the case of Team 558, Elm City Robo Squad. And they had probably the most interesting robot build I have ever seen an FRC team do. They built 4 robots this year, and this was before the end of the bag era. So what they were doing was they were using their withholding allowance, they were using their time out of bag because they were in a district, and they consistently improved their robot from week 0, they went to a scrimmage, to week 1, and beyond that, winning a week 5 and being a finalist at the championships. So they very cleverly used their weight alliance to go from a completely low scoring robot, mainly focused on defenses, to a high scoring, high shooting robot with a batter shot, high goaler focused. And that was just one of my favorite uses of strategy and strategic design this season.
I just looked back at the picture and I lied. They didn't have pneumatic tires. They had, I don't know what kind of tread it was, but yeah, really interesting. Definitely they had like I guess it's like a straight 6 type of drivetrain. So it was a really interesting year again for me being brand new, just seeing kind of how the whole thing worked. And just watching that whole build season process, from watching the release of, the game reveal to, all right, this is what they're going to start doing. So it was really, for me, an amazing experience to kind of sit through and watch.
Yeah, I remember a really strong focus on, I think this was one of the first years that we saw such a heavy presence of the 8-wheel tank drive, where there was the 2 dropped in the center. I remember seeing so much math about how far apart we could space the wheels so that they would get over all of the defenses, and then figuring out the length of the drivetrain based on that, because you didn't want the wheels to be too far in or too far outside of the robot frame parameter. Open drivetrain versus closed drivetrain when it came to defense, and trying to get over all of the, we tested everything over and over and over again. One of my favorite memories is instead of calling the one defense the cheval de frise, we called it the shovel the fries. And that was
everyone called it
from the beginning through the scouting sheet. It was glorious. It was one of my favorite things of that season. It was shovel the fries. Could we get over the shovel the fries? Yes. Fantastic. But I mean, it was a really cool season, and I think it was one of it was the start of the new shooter era that we were seeing in FRC as well. I feel like a lot of the more recent shooters have been very, very similar to the 2016 shooters.
The design meta for this season would be fairly standard. Pneumatic air-filled tires, wide collector that often doubled as a defense manipulator of some sort, and a hooded flywheel shooter. Most teams went under the low bar, even if that wasn't the best design decision. However, there would be a stunning amount of variation in execution of these designs. Defense manipulators were wholly unique based on team, drivetrains saw the most amount of innovation ever featured in a game, and flywheel shooters saw a renaissance of multiple shooting locations. Early competition would focus on rank points and capture, with many teams making use of the low goal as they tuned their high goal shooters. The best teams in the world were those with the most drive practice, and the ones that glued their wires in place. This game was incredibly rough on robots and field reset teams. What were some things that stood out to you from the 2016 competition season?
We competed at week 2 and 4, which is kind of our normal 2 events that they like to go to, which was Kettering 2 and Lansing. They finished pretty well at Kettering. They finished in, I think, ranked fifth, but they lost in the first round of the playoffs. And so for us, it was, okay, let's, they're going to compete and do this as well as they can in qualifications. And it was really a learning how to win for these guys. Seeing the speed at which they went through some of the defenses from week 2, even just week 2 to week 4, the increase, the fact that they were a lot more of the boulders were going in, and so they were getting closer to that threshold to get the extra ranking point or whatever. Climbing in week 2 was a bit of a challenge for a lot of teams. I noticed, we included, but we did have some successful climbs, and I just remember one distinctly where last second rolling up onto actually wasn't a climb, but rolling up onto the ramp thing. I forget what it's called. I forget what everything's called. And just, as the buzzer sounds, it was my first really exciting FRC experience. 2015, I didn't know what the heck was going on. And this year it was a lot more easier to understand. And it really showed me that how extremely competitive this whole thing can be, and how just amazing some of these teams are. We played with some really, really good teams at all of our events, including MSC. So yeah, it was the speed at which they went through the defenses was probably the first thing that I kind of recognized, that, teams were able to, after weeks 1 and 2, kind of really hit those things and just do a lot better, a lot quicker, smoother going through everything,
Yeah. So as a student in 2016, I was scouting, and so I got to really sit there and focus on what was happening on the field. My team competed weeks 2, 3, and 5. We were still in a regional model. So I remember seeing very clearly the advancement of competition level as we got from like early competition through Worlds. We were also competing in Newton that year, which, if I remember, was one of the more competitive divisions at Worlds. And so I really got to see boom, 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 everything all the way through. Weeks 2, there was such a strong focus on the defense, like the getting over the defense RP. Whereas as you advance throughout that competition, I feel like the focus went away from that, because if you had 1 or 2 good robots that could score, you were pretty much going to get that RP simply by virtue of making your cycles. So there was a definite shift in, make sure that we're hitting everything, make sure that we're getting over all the defenses, to, okay, let's focus on, actually scoring, and we'll get the defense when we get the defense RP. As for my team, I remember we put on a climber at our second event, if I remember correctly. We built it out of bag on our practice bot, and then ended up attaching it because we realized that the climb at the end was kind of that like make or break point difference at the end. So I think that was another thing that happened, is a lot of teams didn't design a climber at the very beginning. We had an initial climber, and then I believe we didn't make weight, so it got cut off, which happens. And then we ended up putting on a lighter one. So I feel like that shift was definitely interesting. And then, of course, when you talk about, the game increase at championship, there was also that shift in strategy. So it was an interesting game to scout for sure, because there was so much movement.
Yeah, when you say that teams tune their robots more as they progress through the weeks, it really showed in the fact that more teams turned from going low on the low goals on the batter to actually tuning their shooters and being able to shoot high. When teams focused on that, the game progressed to a much higher state, and teams were doing these cycles so much faster as well. So when we actually got to the championship level, first upped the number of game pieces to capture to 12, and that was up from 10, which they had assumed would be fine for the entire competition season, but there was some wording in the manual that actually said that they could do this, and it turned out to be the right call for championships. We saw more captures than we had all season, and we saw the gameplay increase another level.
I also just want to highlight the audience interaction aspect of this season is almost unmatched. There was all kinds of fun things like audience cheering, deciding which defenses were on the ground, and there was also a lot of tipping just because of the nature of the defenses. So there was a lot of like, cheering and shouting. You had beach bots at the end of worlds there, and even in the video that's playing right now, you've got some tipped robots on the field, and so there was a lot of just like it was arguably one of the most fun seasons to watch as a scout, as just an onlooker. It was a really entertaining season.
The reason we also saw a bunch of tipped robots was because of the bumper zone. So
Yes.
a bumper zone this year was really, really high because
Yes.
you had to get over those defenses. And these robots were designed to go over these bumps and be really small. And a small robot with a robot that's designed to go over something that's like 6 inches high, sometimes you're going to go over another robot.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Rewind. If so, make sure you click that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up to help the algorithm. We'd like to thank this show sponsor, Kettering University, for their support of First Updates Now. Over 30% of high school students who attend Kettering University were in robotics. And if you'd like to go to a university that supports you being in robotics and their incredible programs, head on over to kettering.edu/first to learn more about what Kettering can do for you, including their amazing co-op programs to help you graduate debt-free.
One of my favorite parts of championships was knowing that it was one of the last times that we would have a single championship for the foreseeable future. And a lot of teams really had that sense of camaraderie about them. And I actually was able to meet a lot more teams in person than I had expected to, which was one of my favorite parts. But championships also completely upped the level that this game was played at. There were a lot of competing strategies going into championships, lots of debates about what was better, 3-on-0 versus 2-on-D, or 2-on-0, 1-on-D. And we really got to see both of those strategies play out at the upper echelon level. And I love that about championships this year.
Yeah, and this was my first experience with champs. 2015, we didn't. 1684 didn't make it, so this was my first year, and we were on Hopper. So we had 148, 1678, 971. I mean, it's champs. So you always have that kind of, it seems like every field is like that. But man, it was when I remember walking into the building, and I had no idea of the scope and the scale of champs, first of all. And I didn't know that they were going to be splitting after this year either. Had I known that, I wish I would have known that, because I would have made it a point to check out a lot more teams than I did. I remember walking in on the day of like load-in and everything. We had driven down from Michigan, and one of our mentors, one of the mechanical mentors, goes, "Oh, the cheesy poofs are here." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh yeah, they're practicing right there." I'm like, "The what's?" The name just blew my mind. I was like, "What?" And then to find out, their amazing team and all of this and their history. It was really cool for me and then I started just seeing, in Michigan, my thing was mostly, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And as things were going, I'm like, wow, this team is amazing. And the names of all the teams and stuff, it was just really, really cool. And seeing some of those, teams that, especially now looking back, like we were with Robo Wranglers. Unfortunately, we didn't get to play with any of those teams that I named on the field that day, but it was really cool just to see, the scope and the scale and just how big it was. And, sort of like the party and everything. It was just amazing for me to see as someone brand new to First, new to the whole robotics thing at all. And it was just really cool. And the kids all loved it. Again, it was most of our first year down there at champs. I think they went a couple of them went in 2015 because one of our students won Dean's List at Worlds, and then maybe a couple years before they might have qualified. I can't remember, but it was just very cool to see. And I wish I would have known that it was going to split the next year. I would have been able to. I just would have spent more time talking to some of the other teams. But I remember Hopper being just crazy for me. Again, it was just like, wow, these teams are so good. So it was really, really fun as a new parent, new person involved in the program. So
Yeah, it was 2016 was the last St. Louis Worlds, and don't get me wrong, I love Houston. It's really great to have Worlds a little
Single
closer
St.
to
Louis
home.
Worlds.
Yes,
They
last
were in
single
St.
world.
Louis in 2017.
But the whole, like, Houston's great. I love Houston. It's super great to have Worlds close to home. It is, because I can just drive. My team didn't make it this year. I still went and volunteered. But it's a whole different vibe than St. Louis Worlds was. It just feels different. So it's hard because, like, going back, I have memories of 2016 Worlds, and it was a whole different thing. But my team, like I said, was in Newton, and so we were competing against the Cheesy Poofs. We had Robonauts 2018. We had 67 the Hot Team. We had 179 Children of the Swamp. It was a stacked division, and I remember Bronkbots ended up getting picked. We were the third pick of the third alliance, so we actually were revving. We were so excited. And just watching the game unfold the way that it did was crazy. The rankings, just watching the matches was incredible. There was such an air of competition. There was such, like you were saying, an air of camaraderie. It was arguably one. I mean, it was one of my favorite seasons. 2016 still, in 10 years of doing this, has been one of my favorite FRC seasons. I love it so much. And watching even the shift in strategy, watching all of it just kind of unfold was super cool that season. Plus in at Worlds, you got to see a lot of it was a little bit more of a mixed robot feel, I guess. At a lot of the regionals that we were seeing, there was a lot more short robots. It felt like there was one or two tall robots at every competition, and there was a bunch of short robots. And at Worlds, I feel like we got to see a much higher dispersion of those tall robots. There's just a lot more of them that were visible. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Einstein in 2016 was fascinating. The last single championship for the foreseeable future, different strategies on both sides of the field, and the single best set of 3 matches that year, and most years, had to offer. The first match had a win margin of 8 points in favor of red. The second, a win margin of 10 points in favor of blue. Scores this close were very uncommon this year, averaging around a win margin of 36, but both alliances were playing incredibly well. Red was playing a triple offense strategy, opting to take shots from all over the field and rotating the center shooter as much as possible. Blue was playing a 2-on-0 strategy, with one of the world's best defense robots on the offensive side. Both strategies were working extremely well, in fact. In fact, these teams were so evenly matched that the final match of 2016, Einstein Finals number 3, they'd tie. Yes, the world finale was decided by tiebreakers. Yes, in 2017, exactly the year after, they'd make a rule that ties and eliminations got replayed. It was a stunning end to the season. What did you and your team learn from this game to take forward into future seasons?
For 1684, I want to say, well, first of all, just to piggyback on something Riley had just said, still to this day, that is my stepson's favorite robot, 2016's robot. He loves that thing. They named it Rocky. All of our other names are like mythical creature name or whatever, Roman gods and whatever. And this one's Rocky, but he loves it. Anyway, I think it was this was the first year where they're like, we want to be able to do everything. We were, just to be honest, we were not a very good team. This was one of our first things where we're kind of learning how to win. They won their first blue banner as a third pick in 2015. So they're like just trying to learn how to win and compete at a higher level. And I think they that was one of the biggest things that this game helped them, is they figured we want to be able to do everything. So they were able to shoot, they were able to get through most of the defenses, and they were able to climb. And that kind of built on what they would do in the future years of always wanting to be a supremely competitive team and be able to do all of the things on the field that the game requires, and always trying to shoot for those ranking points. So that was probably what I'd say that 1684 took from it.
Yeah, I think Bronkbots took there's so much from this game. This was the first year that we really heavily like utilized vision and limelight, or not limelight, but the reflective tape. This was one of the first years that like Steve was saying, we did everything. We made it over most of the defenses. I think everything except that low bar. We climbed. We shot high. We were just a super competitive robot, and that competition really carried into the next couple of years. That momentum built us up and kept us going quite a bit. And while we didn't win any blue banners in 2016, we did win a significant number of design awards, which was super cool. It was one of the first times that we'd won like robot design awards. And so we just really enjoyed that. We enjoyed being different than a lot of the other robots on the field. We enjoyed being in the strategy conversations because we were such a successful robot. And then just kind of design wise, I can't even tell you how many times we still have that practice bot sitting in our shop. And we use that robot as a reference all the time. Our last couple of shooters have been designed off of our Nightmare shooter. And yes, that robot was named Nightmare. We did some beautiful branding with it. It was glorious. And then at the end of the season, because it was such a successful season, we actually did this really cool like CAD, like orange and blue neon shirt that every time I wear it in the shop, all of my students are like, Riley, can we get more of these? I'm like, no, these were a one-time thing. These were and it was that season where like we really went from the team that worked out of a garage to this really cohesive unit that knew how to design robots and knew how to strategize and knew how to scout properly. And it was just kind of the turnover for us, I feel. It was a really fantastic season.
So something I think that a lot of teams in the FRC community took from this was the year that a lot of teams learned how to build a flywheel. And we had 5172 up there. 5172 Gatorbots, they never missed the entire season. I think they said they missed like once or twice, but it was that level of excellence that really set the standard for how FRC teams built flywheels and that sort of thing. So that was very important to the community, and what we learned going forward from that was that documentation is important, and that also sharing your results with the community is also very important. So this season really took us from these isolated little communities and brought us a lot closer together. 2016 is widely regarded as a top-tier FRC game, whether it be because of the changing field, the opportunities for strategy, the differences in designs, or the interesting match play. It proved that the era of themed games wasn't going to be all bad. In fact, it would have its moments of brilliance. Thanks for the rewind.
This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in FIRST scholarship. Scholarship applications will open in September. Get ready to go pro and get more information at kettering.edu/first. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on our new videos. Keep the conversation going and provide your input to our content. Watch our live shows at twitch.tv/firstupdatesnow. Join our Discord at discord.gg/firstupdatesnow and check out Fun FTC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and First Updates Now on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter.